10, 9, 8, 7. Okay, here we're live. We're live everywhere. Live on Facebook and YouTube. Still working out the setup on all this, so forgive any technical issues. But now, if you actually put something in the chat, I should actually see it at least on Facebook. Let me see if I can do something on YouTube to make this work. Show chat. Okay, well, nobody's going to talk to me on YouTube anyway. So I've got one thing to talk about today with you, and it's an idea that's been swimming around in my head for a couple days now, and never talked about this before, ever, when it comes to working with someone you're leading, managing, coaching, someone you're influencing as well. So this is going to be a new conversation for me, and it's a chance to flesh out some of these ideas. And so if you can help me do that, then all the better, and hopefully we'll all learn something. So the premise or the thesis I want to offer you here today in this very short conversation is that music is part of a coaching or leadership conversation. Another way of saying that could be improvisation is a part of a coaching or leadership conversation. It's performance art in a way. Now, the reason I think I'm kind of qualified to make this equivalence, which somebody could easily argue, this doesn't have anything to do with the other, right? I mean, one piece is, a type of auditory art form, and the other is just talking, right? It's huge different. I mean, they're both languages, but other than that, come on, they're very, very different. And, that would be a fair argument. But, I grew up studying music and ultimately traveled professionally as a musician, and I actually got my degree, which you see somewhere behind me, in jazz studies with a major in performance. So after I stopped performing professionally for a while, and I got into the coaching business, just another way of saying it's an influencing leadership or mentoring or consulting type of profession. I used a lot of the skills that I had come up with as an improviser, as a musical performer, in my coaching conversations. And I think the main skills as an improviser was that I needed to take, in music, I needed to take things I had played before and done before and kind of reassemble them on the spot in maybe novel ways and maybe new ways to create a new result with the audience and with the fellow musicians that I was performing with. And in a coaching conversation or in a leadership conversation or in a presentation or anywhere where you're influencing or supporting and helping other people, I need to take ideas and frameworks and conversations and what musicians would have called like licks or phrases, and reassemble them in such a way where it fits for the conversation, improvise those things, if you will, and then make it work. Actually make it work for my client or for the group that I'm working with or for my team that I'm managing, right? I'm not just making shit up on the spot. These are concepts and ideas and conversations and frameworks and things I've either used before or I've learned before, I've heard before at a minimum, right? And it's the same in music too. And I'm using them right there on the spot to produce a novel result with a new person, with a new client, a new group, or the client I've already worked with before, an old person, I guess you could say, an old relationship, but now is the time to actually produce a new result with them, to transform something, to cause something that's never happened before, right? So they're similar challenges. The challenge of improvising over summertime, or over giant steps, or over any kind of musical framework that a jazz improviser like myself would perform, is very similar to doing a coaching session, running a coaching session. I kind of know what's going to happen. I have an idea of some of the things that need to occur during that song or during that session. I have an idea, like in the song, I'm going to play the head, I'm going to play the melody, then I'm going to improvise over certain chord changes, and then some other people will improvise, and then we'll play the melody again, and we're done, right? I kind of know that's going to happen, but I don't know a lot of other things that'll happen during that time. And other musicians or the audience or something could react differently to it. Suddenly, it's a whole different performance, right? We might even end up in a whole different song, a whole different tune. If you're really playing well with great musicians, you could change the tempo, you could change, well, anyway, we'll get to that. I'm getting ahead of myself. And again, inside of leadership, or inside of coaching, or inside of influencing, or sales, or presentation, speaking, if you will, where you're really trying to make an impact and trying to transform somebody's life, I know that, like in a presentation, I'm going to tell them what I'm going to tell them. I'm going to break the ice and get them involved. I'm going to set up some premises for the conversation, some belief systems, some ideas, some emotions about it, pre-frame what they're going to experience so they're comfortable with that conversation, and then I'm going to give them content. And then maybe have some interaction between me and the group, the people I'm presenting to, and then I'm going to close. I'm going to tell them what I told them. I'm going to reinforce my point, and I'm going to get them to actually act. I'm going to call them to action. I'm going to ask them to do something now. Do something they wouldn't have done before. Okay, that's kind of what's going to happen, right? I have an idea of what's going to happen. But, I mean, who knows how they're going to react, right? Who knows what might come up inside of the content I present? It's not all scripted. Some of it is, maybe, right? And if I have any interaction or any call to action or any live training where I'm really trying to transform them as a group, I'm going to have to pinch and catch with them, and they might say all sorts of things. So I have some planned ideas on the framework, but then I'm going to improvise inside of that. So there's some things that I know will happen, probably, right? But again, in a live presentation, like, shit breaks all the time, right? Our PowerPoint goes down, or people come in late, or people don't like what you're saying. I mean, who knows, right? So there's a certain amount of improvisation, and there's a certain amount of organization or framework that I'm working within as well. Okay, so that's one obvious similarity between musical performance and like a live speaking performance or presentation. And the same is, I mean, it's no different with a coaching session or with a management conversation or leadership conversation with a small group or with an individual. I'm working with an individual. I'm talking to you. I'm coaching you right now, and you are depressed today, right? Now, I know I'm going to check in with you. I know I'm going to check in with your commitments. I know I'm going to find out what results you're after and support you with those. I know I'm going to ask you to make commitments at the end of the session, and like a call to action, if you will, in a presentation. I know that we're going to schedule, and then we're done, right? So there's a framework, kind of like the music I was just talking about. But, I mean, who knows what's going to happen? You came to the call to press today. I've had sessions where someone has called me up and they said, I had a family member that died today. I didn't even know if I was supposed to call in. I didn't even know if I should have been talking to you, but I figured I'd better, right? Things like that will happen in your sessions or in relationships that you have. And at that point, it's not like everything's out of the window. I still have an idea of what I'm there for. I still have an idea of what my overall transformation I'm looking to provide is. I still have an idea of some frameworks that will probably work with that conversation. But like, hey, my mom died today. Okay, so like, take me through your commitments from last session. It's like, I'm probably not going to do that during that session, right? Now, if my mom died today, and you know what? She's been sick for years and years and years, and it's not a good day, but like, we need to do this session. I'm really committed that we carry forward, and I really am fine. I'm really okay. I've had both situations. I've had situations where somebody's like, I don't know if I can even stay on the phone with you because I'm so freaking out. I'm scared, I'm depressed, I'm sad, something like that. And somebody who's gone through some crap that day, but they're like 100%. So depending on the variation that happens there, I might say, yeah, okay, tell me what you committed to. Let's do some accountability. Or I might say, you know what, forget about that. Just tell me how you're feeling. What do you want to cover today, or what's really important to you in this conversation? I just want to listen first, and then we'll find out if there's something I can really support you with, or if you really just need to go, right? So it's possible that the whole framework goes out the window, and that, by the way, that's happened in music presentations as well. With the right musicians, we can start on one head or one tune. And it's like somebody plays something, somebody decides to go in a different direction, and we're playing a whole different, or it's really short. We completely change things, right? But same thing, again, in a conversation, in this little, where is it? I'm sorry, I have this mirroring. I'm writing everything backwards here, so I'm getting used to signs on this thing. This is my new innovation for our conversations. So anyway, like in here, in this conversation, it's the same thing. Who knows what's going to happen, because it's two people, not one. And it's the same with especially an improvised presentation in music. It's several performers and an audience, and how they will respond or react to that, right? That can be a dramatic difference. So anyway, that's my little premise or thesis. So the other day I'm listening to an interview with one of the great musicians of last century, probably one of the top 5 improvisers of jazz music, or really improvisers at all, in the history of the world. His name's Charlie Parker. People used to call him Bird. There's a video, a movie about him that was made in the 80s, I believe. So and you can check it out. I think it's called Bird. But anyway, one of my kind of idols as a saxophonist. He played saxophone, and I learned a lot about improvisation from him. So anyway, I'm listening to this interview. It's on YouTube. I can probably link to it. And he's talking about a lot of things, about how much he practiced and all this different stuff. But he said, at some point in that interview, he said, you know what, music, when it comes down to it, is pretty simple. It's really just 3 things. It's really just 3 things. And it's melody, harmony, and rhythm. It's melody, harmony, and rhythm. And you can change those things around however you like to do it, but it's really just those 3 things. Just those 3 things. And I'm like, here's a guy who, he played and practiced and became a virtuoso in his craft as well as his art. Over a period of 5-6 years, he would play, 12, 13, 14, 15 hours a day, right? And even with all the complexity that he could probably talk about in that interview, he boiled it down to 3 things that was the epitome of, or the full expression of, his art, like his basically his life's work, right? And I thought, that's interesting. There's really not a lot going on there in terms of the big picture of it. And so I thought, I was starting to make this connection about how, as an improviser and as a musician, all of those kind of skills I had to learn over years, they paid off in a great way as a coach, being able to change the game depending on what somebody says, letting them lead versus me have some scripted thing. And whenever I'm working with students of ours, and if you're watching this and you're in Master Coach University, we're about to start an immersion training like next week. It's our most emotionally intense immersion training called Strategy. It's called a strategy coaching discipline, which is really working with somebody's internal and external strategies on how they produce results in life, or how they're challenged to produce results in life, because the strategy needs to be transformed, let's say. And in that training, if you think everything is going to be scripted for you, or everything is going to be like programmed for you, and it's all paint by numbers, you're mistaken. You can't be effective as a coach if everything is totally scripted, totally regimented. I mean, you can still do some things, but you will not be effective consistently. So coming back to this, I started to realize these skills that I had learned as a musician made me, or kind of set me up to have some of the most important skills as a coach that a lot of our students really need to work on to develop, because they've been, let's say they've gone through 20, 30 years of education where they've been taught to regurgitate information, they've been taught to just do what they've been told, they've been taught to do things within a very narrow focus and not go outside the lines, don't color outside the lines. And there's no doubt there's a lot of creative individuals that will work with us as coaches, and some of them are the best coaches because they already know this intuitive creative process that can generate phenomenal transformation and results for clients, right? But a lot of them don't. A lot of them don't have that skill set yet. They can learn it, but they're walking in without it. So they got to start flexing this muscle that they've never built before. They just don't have yet. So anyway, as I started realizing this, I started to realize, gosh, this is the same thing. What I do as a coach or as a trainer, it's really just music and improvisation. And the three things that Charlie Parker talked about that he was really doing as a coach during this time, that's all I do. That is not just as a musician, but as a coach as well. I'm doing these three things. And I thought, gosh, if it's really just those three things, if I just focus on those and let the rest of the things that I've memorized and learned and been drilled over 20 years now, it's like I can just let that flow when I'm concentrating on the overarching point of all of what I need to do when I'm making a difference for somebody or talking to a group or whatever, what I'm doing here, I suppose. Hey, Sal. Thanks for the comment. Anyway, and yeah, please, guys, feel free to comment on anything I'm saying here, because if it doesn't make any sense or makes sense, or you have something to add to it, I'd love to hear it, because I'd like to make this a bit improvisational and co-created as well. Anyway, so that's what this little picture means. So I want to get off of this and get to these 3 points. So the first one, and this is the simplest one in my opinion, is melody. Okay, so on YouTube, this actually says melody, and on Facebook, I've written it in a mirrored fashion so it doesn't. So I have to, so now this is going to take some additional improvisation. But anyway, this is what I really mean. So I'm going to cater to Facebook, guys, because YouTube, nobody's watching. So anyway, YouTube, this says melody. So, can you see that? I don't know. Anyway, so melody, starting with melody. Now, melody in music is this single line. It's the thing that it's the notes that you sing when you're singing along with the radio, right? It's the main idea. It's just one note at a time generally. Okay? And this is the part that most of us remember, when we're thinking about music. And in a dialogue, in a coaching conversation, or leadership conversation, or even a presentation to a group where you really are communicating and not just reading something, the melody is that, see, I wasn't planning on this, so I'm improvising with my tech here. Anyway, so the melody is the main idea of that conversation, right? Whatever I'm saying right now, that's like the melody. If I'm in a coaching conversation with you, and I'm tracking with what are we up to, and then you're sharing something, and I'm commenting or coaching or acknowledging or challenging you or yelling at you or whatever I'm doing. Hector, this thing does not. I need coaching from you on this one. You see, this is what I started out with, and you could see that it's backwards, right? But on YouTube, which I'm live streaming right now, it's fine. Like, YouTube did not mirror this, and I don't think I have any tech. So what I had to do is I had to go back to the original, because I actually wrote that backwards. So we're back with that. So I need your help on that one. So anyway, this is supposed to say melody. So I have All right. Well, anyway, it's not going to get any better than that. So you get the idea. So anyway, it's the main idea. It's the words that are being said right now. And inside the melody, like as a coach, I need to know what the melody is. I need to know what the main idea is. I need to know what's going, like where is that melody going? What's the trajectory of it? I need to know where's my client going? Where do I want them to go? Where do they ask me to get them to? I need to have an idea of where could they go that they don't even know that they could go to yet, but they really need. So what they want, what they need, right? So these melodies have targets, right? And yes, there's the melody that's happening right now. We might be fighting right now. You know, you might hate my guts. But I also know that where that melody is going to go in 5 minutes is that you're going to love me, or that you're going to love what you got from that conversation, or it's going to be at least a recovery, or you're gonna you know, feel refreshed or enthusiastic or joyful, whatever, like whatever it is. So this melody has a target, and then the melody is currently somewhere as well, and I need to know both of those points. I need to know where am I and where am I going? Where is my client and where are they going in that conversation, right? So that's the melody, and this, you need to be able to improvise that melody, because the client is, or your group that you're working with or leading, or your prospect if you're in sales and influence, they're going to give you all sorts of stuff that maybe you didn't plan on. Hopefully you can plan on as much of that as possible, because there are only so many patterns with human behavior and human responses, you know, 10 or 20 maybe. So you plan on those so you can improvise between what your client is doing. But sometimes people come up with stuff that, you know, you just haven't seen yet, right? And until you've just, you know, worked with thousands of people like I have when you're first starting out, it's like you just don't plan on that, so you got to improvise. Just like I did. I didn't plan on that. For those of you on Facebook seeing it backwards now, I didn't plan on my backwards melody. Melody thing. All right. Anyway, I didn't plan on that. So I got to improvise, and this was the one I wrote before and whatever. Anyway, so you get the idea. That's improvisation of that melody. So I have a trajectory of that melody. I have what they're doing, what I'm doing with the melody. We might have melodies that fit together perfect, or we might have melodies that clash like crazy, that are battling with each other, right? That's a very, very different set of issues, right? But ultimately, there's only one melody at the time. Sometimes I'm going to lead the melody as the coach, right? I'm going to say, here's what we're going to do. This is what's up, you know, tell me to do, you know, do this, stand up, smile, yell and scream. You know, I'm going to tell you to do things. I'm going to ask you things. I'm going to lead that conversation. Sometimes you're going to run the melody, you know, and I'm going to stand back and just let you roll, right? And then we might hand off the melody back and forth and back and forth. In jazz, they call that trading fours or trading eights or just trading, right? So that's a little on melody. You want to know what the melody is and what's going on. By the way, part of this melody is not just what's being said, it's how it's said as well. I can say, you know, this is really great what you're doing, but you need to do this also. Or I can say, wow, this is really great what you're doing, but you need to do this also. Or I could say, look, this is really great what you're doing, but you need to do this also, right? Completely different melody, same words, right? So don't forget the notes, or don't forget that there's more than just words to your melody. There is tonality, there is all the other kind of nonverbal aspects of what you might even say over the phone or over audio nowadays, over Skype or something, that's going to actually have an impact there. Okay, so YouTube, you're going to actually see this actually says rhythm. This is our second area, and for Facebook, here, I'm doing this, I'm catering to y'all because you're actually watching live. I've got the straight one right here. Here we go. Perfect, we're back. Improvisation. So the next one is rhythm. There's going to be a rhythm to my session with you. Sometimes it's going to slow down, and you're going to have time to think. You're going to have time to feel. I'm going to have time to come up with whatever's next. And sometimes it's going to speed up, and we're going to really move. There's going to be a tempo to what we do. Whatever the melody is going to really move quickly, right? Depending on you as the client, like you might be really fast talker, and I got to be able to keep up with you. I got to have a rhythm that can match yours if I'm going to have any rapport with you at all. And if you move slowly, I got to be able to slow down, move with you. But if you are at that same tempo the whole entire session, we might never really get anywhere if we're moving too slow. And if we're moving too fast, we might never really feel what's going on, so it doesn't last. By the way, there is a rhythm not just inside of a session, there's a rhythm throughout a coaching relationship or throughout a leadership relationship as well. Sometimes your client or your team is going to be moving really fast. Like my team right now, like we are at tops. We're having our best quarter of the entire year, and so I'm kicking into high gear and we're moving fast. And I'm just like, guys, we're gonna break our. We already beat our goal for the quarter, and we're only 2 months into the quarter, and I'm like, let's more than double the goal. I'm going to increase bonuses, and we're going to take it to a whole nother level, right? Because I'm going with speeding up that rhythm. Next quarter, it's going to be slower. I'm expecting that, and that's probably healthy. Constantly going at breakneck pace, going on and on and on really, really fast, whether it's with your team or with your client in a session or with your client or team across many months and years, that may not be sustainable. So think about what's your rhythm in a session. What's your rhythm with your client over a period of months? If you're just thinking about what am I talking about, you're just thinking about the melody, you're missing what's inside a rhythm. So rhythm, as a musician, rhythm can change the entire performance. It could be moving fast or slow. It can change the sense of what's going on, the feeling of it. Rhythm in a coaching session or in a presentation, it'll do the same thing. Change the feeling, change the outcome. Depending on what I'm talking to you about or what we're coaching about, we may need to slow down tremendously. Or we may need to go fast and slow and fast and slow and fast and slow. Might need to alternate that. The best sessions that I have, the rhythm of that session changes depending on what's going on. It's never boring. It's not one note over and over again. It is not one rhythm over and over again. So there's a certain rhythm here that we're talking about, which is like tempo and time and fast and slow. And that can happen in a session or long term. But there's also, there's various movements to rhythm. In other words, I might talk to you. Like the rhythm of our conversation might be you talk, I talk. You talk, I talk. You ask a question, you answer it yourself, and then I share my feedback. And then we repeat, right? You talk, I talk. Or the tempo might be, you talk, I talk, you talk, I talk, I talk, I talk. Those are some of my best sessions that go like that. It's like you bring up an outcome, I ask you some questions about it so we can diagnose. You give me some answers so it's fully diagnosed, and then, like hypnosis time, right? I'll go off on a tangent. I'll talk for 25 minutes. And by the way, this breaks, like if you're like an ICF coach, you're coaching to the core competencies that most coaches agree upon, they'd probably say, you're breaking the rules. You shouldn't be doing most of the talking. But in some sessions you should. And in some segments of sessions you should. Because it's some of the most successful sessions when somebody really transforms. Not always, but sometimes it's like there's something that there is to say, and it's going to take 20 minutes to cover it, and it's going to take them on a journey. If they really are in rapport, if they're really engaged, and they're already like emotionally involved in that conversation, or at least strategically involved in the conversation, it's going to be some of the deepest transformation possible for them, maybe, right? So the rhythm is part of that rhythm is not just tempo, but it's also how do the ideas go back and forth? What's the rhythm of exchange between coach and client, or between audience and speaker or communicator, team members? There's all that can be improvised during a session, and probably should be. So that's that second area. We talked melody, we talked rhythm. Now let's talk YouTube. You can see this, and Facebook, I apologize, it's backwards for you. It's going to be a real conundrum for me. Which one should I cater to? So YouTube, you're just going to see backwards. All right, there we go. Final one is harmony. Now this one I left for last because this one is the trickiest. It's the trickiest of all. And the reason I say it's the trickiest of all is because think of it like harmony is like multiple melodies that can happen at the same time. And the melodies, or the notes, so to speak, the music that's being played has to come together to actually produce a combined result. So now we're talking serious chess, not just checkers. We're talking a much more complex set of outcomes here. So inside a harmony, we can have several melodies that are going along at different trajectories, several conversations, if you will, that kind of weave together, and they might not have very much harmony, right? They might be battling each other. They have dissonance. They don't respond very well to each other. They might even antagonize each other, like detract from each other, hurt each other, so to speak. Or we can find ways to get that dissonance, if you will, to turn into consonance, to turn into agreement, to turn into true harmony. And so you don't always have harmony at the beginning of a session. You're not always going to have it. Sometimes you're going to start with dissonance. Your client shows up, they didn't follow through on anything, they're pissed off at you, they're blaming you about what's going on, they aren't producing results and it's your fault. That's happened to me like the last couple weeks. And that was not harmony at the beginning of that conversation. But what I needed to do was find a way to have a melody and rhythm with that client to the point where I could find something to have harmony with, so we could have more and more harmony through that conversation. And it actually took several sessions to get to the point where we were harmonious again, even close to harmonious. By the way, are there times maybe where your team or your group or your client doesn't have harmony within themselves or with people that they're in relationship with, and it has nothing to do with you? It's not even your fault, and then they come out of the session and they create disharmony, they create dissonance with you. You're like, what the hell, like, this is not what I signed up for as a coach, as a leader. I came to this because I want to be inspired by my clients, not have them bitch at me, right? But guess what? Just realize there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing wrong with them. It's just part of the music. Sometimes you play a note that doesn't go with the rest of the group. Sometimes there's voices that don't agree with each other. Like, that's why you're there. That's why you're a leader. There's no need for a leader or a coach if there's already harmony before you even showed up. They don't need to pay your fee. They don't need to hire you as a manager. It's not needed. So, what is this about? This is not about harmony. You always have to have perfect consonants and everything's working. But you're working towards, how do these different voices come together to produce a result that's greater than the sum of its parts? I'll say that again if I can remember it. How do you make these notes, these voices, these ideas, these arguments, if you will, come together to the point where they're so harmonious, to the point where they're so aligned, or aligned enough, such that they're greater than the sum of their parts? If you want nothing but perfection, don't be a leader, don't be a coach, because there's always some dissonance, there's always some problem, there's always somebody bitching about something. If you go to the beach and you look at the waves, and there's so much beauty there, the truth is, if you get deep enough in there, you'll see turmoil. You'll see the waves churning water around, throwing people back and forth. But the fact is, you can dive into those waves and you can drown, or you can dive into those waves and you can surf on them. What's the difference? The difference is how you took that, what seemed like chaos, and turned it into something beautiful. That's part of your job, I think, as a coach or as a leader, to be able to be the artist that can improvise with the notes that your client is bringing to that song, so that you can find notes that work well enough, not perfect necessarily. Sometimes you'll challenge your client and they're going to hate your guts for it. I'm going to say, look, you're bullshitting around with me and you don't get to do that with me on this session. And the reason I say that is because if you're going to be so slimy, then our conversation isn't going to be worth anything. You break your commitment in our last couple sessions, you show up here and you're bitching about everybody else when the truth is you're being a jerk. Tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong. Now, if I had just said everything other than that last statement with a client, it probably would never create any harmony. But at the end, if I give them permission to tell me I'm wrong, they can say, yep, you're wrong, and then all of a sudden, I can align with that, or I can create another conversation, another melody that goes enough with what they said, hey, why am I wrong? Tell me how I'm wrong, right? All of a sudden, now we've got something we can have some rapport on, and we can start to have harmony. But how did I start that conversation? Bam, no harmony. Zero harmony. I've taken harmony away. So I guess the point I'm making here is that harmony is a great goal, but it doesn't always happen constantly during a coaching relationship, a coaching session, a leadership relationship, a team relationship. Part of that disagreement, that chaos, that disharmony is part of the beauty of life, the diversity of relationships, and part of the challenge that you need to face. And if you're not willing to face it, don't bother calling yourself a coach or a leader, because you are an abomination to that promise. You can't say, I'm a coach and I just do this with these kind of people that I'm really comfortable with, and then when they show up and they don't do what you want them to do and you feel uncomfortable, you just walk away and blow them off. If that's you're part of the problem with the coaching world. Part of the problem with the world of leadership. Why we tend to not trust our leaders is because we find that they just want us to be in harmony with them rather than actually be a part of that song. Be a part of be willing to be improvising. That they're willing to find a way to not accommodate or tolerate, but to get in sync with some of the notes that we're playing, so we can have something that comes together that's, again, greater than the sum of its parts. So I think you can find great harmony with your client, not always, not constantly. That's not the point. The harmony is part of the greater picture. If you listen to music that's nothing but harmony, nothing but perfect consonants, but perfect right notes, it gets boring after a while. Some of the most beautiful music is some of the music that at first seems a bit ugly. It takes a little getting used to. Part of what makes any musical presentation beautiful is the fact that parts of it don't sound as nice as others. And it makes us really value the harmony when we get it. And it's the same for your client. Your client, they might feel beat up by you sometimes, but if you're maneuvering them towards harmony at times, they're going to really value that harmony. They're going to value you as a coach or a leader even more. So that's part of that third area, I think. And so when you're thinking about leading or presenting or influencing or coaching, any of those areas, very similar, I think about these three areas. Think about harmony. Think about, that's backwards, melody. Think about rhythm. And you can, it's only three things, so you can actually think about those three things at once. You can think about, what's the rhythm that we're having here? What is the harmony or lack of harmony that we're having in the session right now? And what's the main melody? And if I think about that while I'm coaching, I have a funny feeling that the art of that conversation is going to really bear fruit. Now, how can I do that? How can I do that when I am concerned about how to coach somebody? How can I do that when I'm concerned about what to say? How can I do that when I'm concerned about not being able to understand what's going on with my client? Well, one thing is I can just be committed to being there, truly being there. And in order to truly be there, I've got to be open to what's the rhythm and melody and harmony that's going on at the moment. That's part of life. That's part of relationship. It's just being there for them, being 100%. Part of the way that I can do that is by making sure I learn all those conversations and I know my stuff and I understand how to diagnose somebody and I appreciate how they're motivated and how they're not. I get the concepts that I'm going to bring to the table for them, even if they don't. I can educate them on that because I don't have to think about it or remember it myself because I know it so well. And even if I don't know it that well, I can keep some notes in front of me to help support myself in that too, right? So then once I handle that, I can forget about all of that, like Charlie Parker had said once in that same interview. I could forget about all that I learned and mastered and spent years and decades to master, my 10,000 hours, and I can just play. Then I can just perform. And the way that I'm going to perform is not by memorizing something, although that can help. The way I'm going to perform is not by doing the script, although that could help. The way that I'm going to really perform well is by being there and being in the song at the moment, being in the song that's happening, the performance that's happening, the relationship and the spirit that's going on right there in that dialogue that I have with my client or my team or the group that I'm presenting to. That's how I can be there 100%. I can set everything I've learned aside, because if I'm sitting there focused on what I learned or what I haven't learned yet, trying to figure it out, I can't be 100%. I can't focus on the rhythm, the melody, and the harmony of that world that I'm in right at that time. So that's my little thesis. It went way, way longer than I had planned, but thank you for hanging out with me here and letting me get the ideas out. And if any of this didn't make sense, feel free to tell me so I can work on massaging it a bit. But if you have questions about it, please feel free to ask and put those in the comments as well. And I will talk to you next time.